Oklahoma fans are viewing this, and I think a lot of people are viewing this, and I think even I am viewing this as a pretty significant and important hire in the sense of like going and getting somebody that is very, very good at evaluating. And like I want to be careful here because I don't want Oklahoma fans to think I'm being negative about what I think is a positive hire. But we have to unpack this a little bit, right? And the unpacking is talent evaluation. I'd be curious to ask him, and maybe I'll give him a call and talk to him about this, different from the NFL level and even the end of college career level to like breaking down 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids, right? Like there is a difference between those two things. And I'm assuming that, from an evaluation standpoint, Oklahoma is going to have multiple people doing this job. But that to me is the one question that I would have. And then two, what are the actual responsibilities that he's going to have? Not the ones that are on OUSooners.com that they list in the press release. Like what is he going to do from a day-to-day basis?
Well,
going to be
Billy in 2000. Yeah, Billy in 2005 has an interesting comment here. And this is something we see in the NFL. And it's a question you ask with each NFL head coaching and GM job. And now we're going to have to start asking it with every college one. Oklahoma's GM and head coach are not tied together, Billy in 2005 writes in the comment. They report to two separate entities, so if Brent Venables is terminated, it will not affect the general manager and he will have a hand in hiring. So what this means essentially, like he would report to Joe Castiglione, who's the athletic director. And this is a key part of this because, Florida just hired a GM. They ended up hiring Nick Polk, who used to work for the Atlanta Falcons. He was working for Athletes First, which is a group of sports agents. And originally, it seemed like that job was going to report to the AD. When it was hired for, it became clear that job was going to report to Billy Napier, the head coach. And that is a different job. And so it sounds like the Jim Nagy job is much more similar to the traditional NFL GM job where, like, for example, the Bears, they fired Matt Nagy, no relation. They go hire Ben Johnson as their head coach, but Ryan Poles remains the GM. And Ryan Poles had a hand in choosing the new head coach. That feels like more of what this is.
And if that's what this is, then that's completely uncharted territory, right? Because the GM in college football for the past, decades has been the head coach. The head coach is the person who has final say on who's coming in, right? Like, and who they're going after, whose tape they like, who they want to take a stab on, like how to use scholarship allocation for, sure things versus position. Like the GM, who do we find directly responsible for the talent on the roster? The head coach, right? So if you now move into this role, I kind of have a hard time separating the two. Like, even if that's the case, like, there's got to be some sort of autonomy in terms of, what system the coach wants to run and what type of players they're scouting and all these types of things. I'm assuming that he would still, like, that Jim Nagy would still answer to Brent, right? Like, I don't even know how that works if he doesn't.
Not necessarily answer to, but work in concert with. Like, in the NFL, when you have now, we only notice when they don't see eye to eye, but like Brent Veach, the GM of the Chiefs, and Andy Reid get along fabulously and collaborate. Brent says, Andy, what do you need? What are you thinking here? Here's who I like. Who do you like? And that's how it's supposed to work. We notice it when it becomes like when Harbaugh was with the 49ers and he and Trent Baalke got sideways. And then it became a power struggle. So it's supposed to be a collaborative effort. And I'm guessing, you and I know Jim, like he's going to go in there and work with Brent Venables. Like he's going to go in there and say, hey, Brent, what do you need to succeed here? How can I help you? And that's the part that's going to be interesting.
The GM is not answering directly to the coach, and the GM would be around if the head coach were to be fired. Almost feels like it's undermining the position of the head coach to me. Like based on the way
because we cover college football, and this is how it's always been. If we covered the NFL, we'd be like, well, this seems pretty normal.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, and I'm not saying that it is undermining. It feels weird because to me, the CEO and the coach and the talent accumulator and the recruiter and the scholarship breakdown, like all of that used to fall on the head coach's desk. So
Right.
if you're telling me now that like Brent's job is to, like, who's the main recruiter in this scenario? Still Brent, right?
I would think so.
So like,
But you know what the main recruiter is, Ari?
money.
Money.
Yeah.
The main recruiter is NIL.
Yeah, I
So-
knew we have to have a discussion too in the future about like how important are official visits anymore? Like, because that used to be the biggest deal in the history of the
I
world.
had a discussion with a personnel person about this the other day.
Yeah.
And I had a discussion with somebody who was actually talking about these GM jobs with that, because they said their thing was like, here's a terrible piece of inefficiency, which, look, if you want to find inefficiency, go look in a college athletic department. But why are you bringing all these people in that you know won't necessarily sign with you? Like, what's the point of that? Why do you have to have all of these people at the dinner that they're going to on the official visit? Like, why do all these staff members have to go to the dinner at a giant steakhouse where everything's expensive? Why don't you just pare it down and shave
Andy?
200 grand off the budget and buy yourself a backup offensive tackle?
Andy, how many visits did you take to Nashville when On3 was trying to hire you?
0.
Me too.
Yeah. I did not visit New York when I got hired at Sports Illustrated. I had been in the building before, but not when I was up for the job.
How many
The Athletic did not have a brick and mortar office when I got hired.
Yeah, they did. It was in San Francisco, and you didn't go.
Oh, they did. Okay, that's right. That's right. But I never went there.
I never went anywhere. Both at On3 at the Athletic or the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Even I might have at the Cleveland Plain Dealer because I was an hour away. But yeah, so like I just feel like if that's the thing, but like, here's the most important and interesting thing to me.
When it comes to making the best burgers around, the basics matter. And Wendy's, well, they've got those burger basics on lock. And boy, does it show. What is the secret to all those hot and juicy burgers? Simple. Wendy's always crafts their burgers with that fresh, never frozen beef that they're famous for. The result, hot and juicy, beefy hamburger perfection every single time. No matter what burger you order from the Wendy's menu, I'm a Baconator guy myself. You already know that thanks to those Wendy's burger basics, it's going to be exactly what you were craving. Fresh beef available in the contiguous U.S., Alaska, and Canada. Not available in Hawaii. Get yourself a fresh, never frozen Wendy's burger today.
Who is the number one personnel person in the entire country that comes to your head? Like, who pops into your head when I ask you that?
Mark Pantoni.
Do you know what his salary was last year?
I don't.
Guess. Take a wild guess.
$450,000.
$351. Now,
which
their head coach is making $11 million,
$12 million a year. So Mark Pantoni, for those who don't know, is Ohio State's
GM.
He's their GM.
Yeah.
In terms of like if it were an NFL front office, we would call him the probably director of player personnel.
When he got the job there, it was director of player personnel, which is what all these personnel people were called.
And he invented this job. Like, Pantoni started out as a student at Florida, working for Urban Meyer when Urban Meyer was Florida's coach, and essentially invented this job. And there are multiple people who've invented it in different ways. Like Austin Thomas, who's at LSU right now, was another one who's doing it. Pat Suttis, who's at North Carolina.
Austin Thomas?
Do
you know what his salary was last year?
Oh, what's that?
$425. You know Billy Glasscock, who's at Ole Miss and used to work at Texas for a while there? $425. General manager Courtney Morgan at Alabama, who had a hand in both Washington and Michigan, was making $777 at Alabama this year, which is a lot for that position. But like Marshall Malkow, who's at Oregon and has been all over the place and is considered one of the most
of the best. Yes.
Best, right. $550. So the thing that I'm very curious about now with this, it's not just the Nagy situation, but it's also what does this mean for the people who have already been doing a really good job at that? Like with Lombardi making $1.5 million Like the entire.
And let's talk about that, because producer River asked about Mike Lombardi, who's a former NFL GM who works for Bill Belichick, and now he's the GM at North Carolina. And it's interesting because River asked, is that a similar situation with North Carolina where Lombardi reports to somebody else? No, it's not, because like Belichick's the one guy in the NFL who had full personnel control. So like Lombardi reports to Belichick.
Yeah. So the thing that is interesting to me is, have you been to the we probably should go this year because it's in Nashville, the player personnel symposium. Have you ever gone to it?
I haven't.
It's just a kind of a meeting with all the people who work in personnel across the country. And I think that the general vibe in that room when I've gone is that we are grossly underpaid and underappreciated, right? Like, and I think a lot of the people in that room probably have a aspiration of one day being an NFL GM, because that to me, or to them, is the epitome of, it's like me and you being the lead, like Adam Schefter, for instance. I don't know, like what would we be? So now
Cat and PFT. Yeah.
The thing that's interesting though is if Lombardi's going to make $1.5 million at UNC, and I don't know what Nagy's making. Have they reported what he's making?
They have not. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm sure it's going to be north of $500,000. Then all of a sudden the player personnel people who used to be the $30,000 to $150,000 employees that were getting raked over a barrel making graphics all day are now seeing a renaissance in their salary. And it's like, if Lombardi's making $1.5 million at North Carolina, then what the hell is Mark Pantoni worth? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what?
Well, remember,
he's been lopsided. When Urban Meyer took the job and brought Pantoni with him to Ohio State in 2012 or 13, he said, like in his introductory press conference, or like one of the first press conferences that he did at Ohio State, that Pantoni's the most important person in the conglomerate. And if that's the case, how has he been making $300K this whole time?
Yes, it's time for that to go. Now, remember, USC just hired Chad Bowden away from Notre Dame. And I believe that the rumors were that that's a fairly high salary. Now it's USC; they're private; they don't have to say what they're paying anybody. But I think that one's toward 7 figures, because USC needed to change some stuff in its recruiting, and so they went and hired somebody from Notre Dame, where they were doing it the way USC would like to do it.
So if this is the way it's being done at Oklahoma, then is this the way it should be done at Ohio State? Is this the way that it should be done at Alabama? Is this the way that it should be done, or are they trying to mix it up? Like, I think it depends.
Like, I don't think anybody knows how it's supposed to be done, because the system is constantly changing. I mean, it's going to change again if the House settlement gets approved and you go to revenue sharing. The system's going to change again, and it'll have radically changed 2 or 3 times over the past 5 years. So nobody actually knows what the right answer is. So everybody's trying stuff.
So I think I want to write about this. So do you think that how do you view the Jim Nagy hire? Okay, so everyone says home run. The fact that they were able to get him is a huge deal for Oklahoma. All this, everybody's saying this, but like, is this an experiment? Is this like
every one of these is an experiment?
I know, but this seems like a pretty big hack at it. Like, this is a pretty big.
This is one of the first where you've had a major college football program that looks at the changes in the sport and says, this looks more like the NFL now. Perhaps we need to consider an NFL management model as opposed to the more traditional college one.
You also have to consider the timing of it and where we are in the Venables time arc. Like, it's like, you don't really, like, you're messing with, you're changing the mechanism for talent accumulation during a year in which he's probably entering like on the semi-hot seat.
But the thing is, the talent's been accumulated for this year. Like, I don't care what everybody said. Like, I know everybody you probably saw people saying last year, the spring portal is going to be incredible and wild. And we didn't say that, because we would have been lying to you if we'd have said that. The same thing's going to happen this year. The spring portal is not going to be that wild. And Oklahoma, what they have right now is about what they have. So in terms of personnel, Jim Nagy's working on future years. Brent Venables has to win this year.
Yeah. Do you think that this is going to create leverage and change the position across the board at other places who have been successful. Like Oklahoma traditionally is one of the most successful programs in college football, but there's no question that they've fallen on hard times in recent years, right? I know they had 110-win season under Venables, but I don't think that Oklahoma fans would be like, yeah, this is how we drew it up. So like how does this change what happens at Miami? How does this change what happens at Ohio State or even Wisconsin? Like, I don't know. Like, this to me is like a complete departure from everything that we knew. And like, also too, if this position exists, let's say Brent Venables has a 10 or 11 win season this year, which by the way, I think is on the table. Like, I think they might have pieces. Deion Burks is going to have a good year. John Mateer
is a really good quarterback. Yep.
Going to be better. I don't question their defense with Venables in charge. Like, I actually think that Oklahoma has a chance to be really good this year. So if Oklahoma is really, really good this year, and then they stink in 2 years, whose fault is it?
It's a good question. But I can tell you the first person to get fired will be Brent Venables, because
is that how it works in the NFL? Are coaches just fired before GMs all the time?
Usually.
Even if you can see with your eyes that the players stink?
Well, but in the NFL, well, it depends on the situation. Like, every situation is different, and that's what you got to remember. Every situation is different in college too, because like you're talking about Ohio State. Now, I'm with you. Mark Pantoni is criminally underpaid at Ohio State. I would not change the way Ohio State's structure works because Ohio State's structure is working. Like, you don't need to change it.
So like, that's the thing that's interesting about Ohio State. It's like, I wrote a story in 2014 at the national championship game about Mark Pantoni. So it's freaking 10 years ago. And you know how they have the media day setting?
Yeah.
Like how you go in and the entire team's wearing jumpsuits or whatever. And 2014, Mark was in the room when they played Oregon in the national championship game. And like, I like remember thinking to myself, like, and he had like kind of a smile on his face. It's like, God, could you imagine the sense of satisfaction of just being the small dude in the corner of the room where if you don't cover Ohio State, you might not even know who he is, who basically assembled this entire thing that brought Ohio State there. And then like you fast forward 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then Ohio State's playing Clemson in one of the bowl games in a playoff game. And I'm writing a story or reporting a story about Brent Venables being the first $1 million coordinator. And like now Jim Knowles is getting paid north of $2 million at Penn State to go do the same job there, $3 million. And then like, you're like, who do you think's more important to Ohio State's success last year, Jim Knowles or Mark Pantoni? It's like, who do you think is a bigger piece to like doing it?